Welcome back, everyone. Attorney Craig Steger here. I'm a little late today. Actually, I'm about in the Midwest here in Wisconsin. It was it was predicted. It wasn't clear until this morning whether it was going to hit us or go around us. So it was kind of precarious getting the kids to school today, and then we ended up they ended up canceling early, and so they never should have sent the kids to school at all today. But be that as it may, but my one high school boy had to work tonight. He's a host at a restaurant, and my wife didn't really want to drive on the roads to take him to work, so I had to take him to work, and I came back so I could live stream with you guys today. So before we get today we're going to talk about what happens when your car gets wrecked in a car crash that you didn't cause. What are your options? I was speaking to someone this afternoon in that situation, and it's a common question I get. So I wanted to kind of talk about that a little bit today. But before we do, let's get the little stuff out of the way. So this live stream is for informational purposes only and does not constitute legal advice. Viewing or participating in this live stream does not create an attorney-client relationship. I'm an attorney in Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Iowa. I cannot help you if you are in another state, but I can try and answer general questions. So if people have any general questions, regardless of where you're at, in the comments, feel free to drop those in the comments or in the chat. I'll answer them if I can, or if I can't, if you leave a comment afterwards and during the replay, I'll try any other questions in the comments, or maybe I'll do another video. People can always leave me an email, especially if you have a particular case you have questions about. Please don't leave that in a comment or in the chat. Just reach out to me by email. If you go down to the description, contact information is there, how to get a hold of me. So with that in mind, let me take that off the screen. So I have found over almost 20 years of working with people who have, been in a car accident. One of the first things that they have to confront, well, there's two things that they usually need to deal with. Number one is, should I go to the doctor? How soon should I go to the doctor, and who's going to pay for it? That's a question for a different video. I'll maybe do that next time, but I'm not going to answer that particular question today. The second thing, and oftentimes the thing that's more pressing for people, is what happens when your car gets destroyed, or your truck, or whatever vehicle you're operating. What happens when it gets damaged? It has to be repaired, or as is kind of common, it's just the repair costs are so much that they just total it out. So what does totaling out means? And this may vary by state, but basically, um, totaling means, and generally speaking, if your vehicle is destroyed in a crash, you're entitled to either the cost to repair the vehicle or the fair market value of the vehicle at the time of the crash, whichever those is less. Okay, so the cost to repair or the fair market value of the vehicle, whichever is less. So let's say you have a car and it's worth $10,000, and you get into a crash, and it's going to take $5,000 to fix it. Pretty obvious. The insurance company's going to pay $5,000 to have you get the car fixed, or at least that's what they're going to pay. Whether you get it fixed or not may be up to you. Depends on whether you got a loan or not. I remember back when I was a poor college student, or maybe I just graduated from college and I was getting ready to go to law school, and I bought the Subaru from a, a single gentleman who had taken really good care of it, always had it serviced, and it was a Subaru Legacy, one of the best cars I ever had. And it was a day like this. It was very snowy, and I had I had bought the car. I paid like $2,000 for this car. This is quite a few years ago. So I bought this car, paid him cash or whatever, and um, I was on my way up to Minneapolis, Minnesota to visit a law school because I was planning to go to law school at that point in time. And so I just bought the car. I didn't have the car more than a couple of months. And I'm sure I didn't get collision coverage on it because like I said, I was a poor student and I had liability coverage, but I didn't have a loan on it. So I probably didn't have any collision coverage on it. Um, so I was on my way up to visit the law school, and it was a snowy day like this, and I'm driving along, I'm being careful, and I'm going through Red Wing, Minnesota. And there was a car coming from the other direction. I was coming up to an intersection. I don't know if I had just gone through it or whatever. And all of a sudden, the car lost control and started to slide sideways. And it was, kind of like a Capri or something like that, like a four-door sedan. And it turned out to be a high school girl. Was on her way to school, probably running a little late, or just wasn't really good at driving on the roads yet, slippery roads. And she lost control. And I remember seeing the kind of the helpless look on her face as she slid sideways into my lane. And I, of course, hit the brakes. But because the roads were slippery like they are today, I kind of hit her at an angle. I hit so the side of her car, the passenger side of the car was in my lane, and I kind of hit her at an angle, the front driver's corner of my car. Well, because of that, it kind of busted in the headlight, crumpled up the hood a little bit, damaged the bumper, and then it pushed out the quarter panel over the front driver's side wheel. Right, it kind of looked pretty ugly, but it was still drivable. Didn't really hurt anything mechanically. I think the headlight and blinkers still worked, but the assembly was kind of rattling around in there because the plastic pieces had broken up. And I remember she was insured with State Farm. Her parents were insured with State Farm, and they said so. I was in touch with them and took her to a body shop, and the body shop was like, "Yeah, it's going to be like." Trying to think what it was, $1,600 or something like that to fix the car because the hood was damaged, the quarter panel was damaged, the headlight was damaged, and I think the bumper assembly was damaged. And fortunately for me, they didn't total it because that was a really good car. I drove that all through law school. I drove it during my first job, and then I sold it later for like $900 after putting like 100,000 miles on it. But so anyway, I got this money. I had and the car was paid for, and but it still worked. And so I was like, well, I could get the car paid for, but it was used. It had a lot of, it was an older car. So I I hooked on, I got a chain or something, and I hooked it on to the front of the car, and I wrapped it around a tree, and I like backed up or something, and I pulled the front forward, which kind of pulled the quarter panel in, and then I used like I don't know, I used a wrench or a big pliers or something, and I kind of bent the hood up so it opened and closed, and then I just left it. I did. This is back really before the internet was much of a thing, but I bought a salvaged headlight assembly online. For like $100. So I spent $100 and I bent the car back kind of into shape, and then I kept the rest of the money. And I drove that car for the next 5 years, and it kind of rusted and stuff. I should have painted it, but that's how it worked, right? It was the cost of repair. Um, and so they paid me the money, and then but because I didn't have a loan or anything on it, was kind of up to me what to do with the money that I got. And so that car paid for itself like right away, and it ran great. It ran that for all across the country. We had our first two kids we had that, so I had car seats in the back of it. We would when we would travel back from law school. I went to school in Michigan. We had this big cargo bag on the top, and we'd strap it down, uh, and so I missed that car. It was a really good car. Um, but that was my first experience with this issue. But it's a common one, right? So what happens? If you have a loan on the car, it's more problematic. And so the person I was talking to today, this is exactly what happened. It was a used vehicle. Let's say they owed $5,000 on the vehicle, and that's basically what the vehicle's worth. And so they're like, "Well, it's totaled. It was badly damaged. Insurance money is going to go to the bank, and then they're going to be left finding another vehicle." They're like, "What can we do?" I'm like, "Well, there isn't a lot you can do because that's what you're generally limited to is the fair market value of your vehicle at the time. This is where you want to have gap coverage if you have a loan, especially if it's a newer loan. Those cars can really depreciate early on in the loan. And so that gap coverage is the difference between the fair market value, which is really all the insurance company, either your insurance company if you have collision coverage, or the insurance company for the other car, the other driver. It's the fair market value, but a lot of times what you actually owe on the car is more than the fair market value. So they don't compensate you for what you owe on it. They compensate for what the car is worth. And so the gap coverage is something that's really good to have because it covers the difference between the fair market value and whatever is left on the loan. We went through this with my daughter last year. We had gotten her first car. She had it 6 months and was involved in a minor crash that was someone else's fault. Same thing. Car was totaled. And there was a gap. Like the fair market value was like $3,000 less than what we owed on the car. But fortunately, I had gap coverage and was able to cover that. And then we went in a different route. We got a different car for her, right? But that's kind of the way it works. That's what the property damage works. There isn't really much you can do, but some of the options you have available to you that some people may not be aware of is typically you are entitled either by just general rule or maybe by your own insurance policy to the cost of a rental. So if your car is going to be in the shop for 3 weeks, under most policies, you're going to be entitled to whatever it costs to find a reasonable replacement vehicle, right? Um, and you might as well use it. You pay for that insurance. The other side owes it to you. So if you can afford it, feel free to rent a vehicle, but check your policy first. Talk to your insurance agent. But take advantage of the rental coverage if you can. One of the things that I remember with my daughter's situation is um, because she was just out of high school, she's going to college. Um, when her car got wrecked, we were eligible for rental car coverage, but she couldn't rent a car because I think you have to be like 24 in most states. So she's not 24, so she couldn't rent a car. Um, and she had a Toyota Prius, right? Well, I said, "Well, you drive my vehicle. I have a minivan. We have two minivans that we haul our bunch of kids around with." But I couldn't. I need more than a car myself because I have to haul the kids to school. So I ended up renting a minivan for myself. So my daughter drove my van, and I rented a minivan. And then I paid more. I so can't. A, a Prius doesn't do me any good, so I got a minivan. I paid extra for it, and we'll probably we'll probably eventually get that back. Um, yeah, Mia, I think Maya. I can't remember. Yeah, that's a pretty common occurrence. I mean, um, it's hard if you don't have the money, and a lot of times being without a car is a really difficult thing because that's how you get to work. That may be how you get to the doctor or take your kids to school and things like that. So that's what I had to deal with when my daughter, uh, when my daughter got into her accident. Um, so rental coverage, but it's not indefinite. It's for a reasonable amount of time, and generally speaking, the party that caused the crash is going to be on the hook for rental for a reasonable amount of time. Okay, whatever's reasonable is going to depend a lot on the circumstances, where it's at, is the car being repaired or replaced. If you got to go get financing and do things like that, um, that can affect the timing of things. Whereas if it's on your own policy, it probably says we will provide you with a rental car for up to 28 days or 14 days or whatever the case may be. It's typically capped on your own insurance. At least that's what I typically see. Every policy is a little different. That's why it's really important to talk to your insurance agent and find that out. But rental coverage is something a lot of people may not know that they have. But one thing I want to talk about, because it came up when I was talking to this person today, is you know the insurance companies move quickly when vehicles are totaled, right? Like because it costs money to have them sitting in a tow lot somewhere, and so they pretty much they pretty much clear them out right away. And so this vehicle's on the other side of the state now, right? And I actually had that happen in a case I had a few years ago down in Iowa. A guy in a pickup truck was badly injured, in his pickup truck with a dump truck. So the insurance company was a total loss. Took that vehicle, and it was 2 hours away in a lot, one of these big lots that the insurance company has. And I'm like, I want to see this truck. There's probably black box data because there was a dispute in the case about whether how fast my guy was going, whether he hit the brakes and things like that. And I'm like, well, I don't want to lose that vehicle. So actually, I believe I bought that vehicle. I may have bought that vehicle as evidence, or we arranged to have the um, basically bought it back from the insurance company. And it turned out to be good that we did because we used that data to put together an accident reconstruction that more or less turned the case for us and got a really good result. I probably couldn't have done that if the car had been lost or if they had called me too late, right? So this is where it's good that this person was just in a crash, but these are some of the considerations. Like, the insurance adjuster probably is going to take some pictures of the car, but they're looking at it more from like, oh, is this a total or not? They're not really looking at it to try and forensically decide what happened, um, who was at fault, speeds, and things like that. They're not really thinking about it, but that stuff can be really, really important if there's a dispute later on about who was where, whether they were braking, and things like that. It's so it's really important to have access to that data, and it can be lost very quickly just because once the car is totaled, a lot of people, they sign off on it. They're like, well, I don't need a junked out car. And so I really, really like it when people talk to me right away so that we at least have an opportunity to go out and inspect and take a ton of pictures, measurements. Sometimes I may, bring an accident reconstructionist out there and do the exam and find out, do we want to keep the vehicle? Um, I had a case, that's probably 10 years ago now. It was a motorcycle. And it was a motorcycle accident. And the question was whether the tire that went flat was defective. So we had this Harley Davidson motorcycle, and the people were from Wisconsin, but they were driving out west when they got in a crash. So the bike was out in Wyoming. And we actually worked with the insurance company or the tire company that we sued, and we actually bought it together. We bought the Harley together, and I found one of these. You can't, you know, you can't just hire a tow company to go from Wisconsin to Wyoming and pick up a motorcycle, and it was important that the bike was not damaged at all during transportation, right? We didn't want any changes to that bike because there was going to be a huge dispute about how the accident actually happened, and so we coordinated and we hired a kind of a white glove company. Went out, picked it up, and they were very careful, wrapped it, and they hauled it back and delivered it. And then I think what we did is we put it into a storage unit. And we just split the cost on that. I mean, that's it. The insurance company really wanted to preserve that bike, and I wanted to preserve the bike. And we had people out looking at the bikes and photographing it and measuring it. And so that's kind of the stuff that can be really important, especially if there are bad injuries or a death, like in that case. Um, so, but I know it's hard. It's hard because if you're in that situation, you're like, and for that person, there was a death, and they're like, I, I didn't want that motorcycle. The widow was like, I don't want that motorcycle anywhere around. And she's like, you can leave that in Wyoming. And then we're like, well, we actually want that bike, right? Same thing with cars. Not most people don't want a junked out car sitting in their driveway, and plus you're essentially paying the scrap value for that vehicle. So when a vehicle's totaled, it's not like it doesn't have value, right? They go to the scrap yard. There's probably parts or maybe tires. They may take the motor out. You know, the wrecked vehicle, especially like I was mentioning my daughter. My daughter's car was a Prius, and it was front end damage, but the batteries alone in that thing are worth a lot of money, and so that I wouldn't be surprised if that car had $5,000 worth of scrap value to it, right? And so sometimes it can be a lot, and sometimes if it's an older car, it's not. I don't remember what I had to pay for that pickup truck, um, but it was worth it in that case. But yeah, I mean, trying to find another vehicle is a really difficult thing, and money might be tight. Interest rates have gone up a lot on car loans over the last few years, and so you may have gone from a car, maybe you spent maybe you're in the last year of a 3-year car loan, and you're like, now I got to start all over again. Interest rates are higher. Um, Maybe the bank won't, especially if I have another situation where someone was involved in a crash, and I think they did not have gap coverage. So they have a loan, like they owe the bank money on their last vehicle, and now they're going back and say, "Hey, I need money to buy another vehicle." And the bank's like, "Well, right." That's a really difficult situation. Um, so how often do you go for diminished value on a repaired car? Um, I guess it depends what you mean by that. You know, Generally speaking, I'm trying to think if I've had a situation, but usually if a car gets damaged, you get the car repaired, right? And the idea being that um, you fix it, the car is back, right? Well, we know as a practical matter that's not actually the case because if a car has been in a crash before, it tends to not have the same resale value later on. I remember I had a case a few years back where the person was driving a very nice, I think it was a BMW SUV. It was a very nice vehicle, and it was damaged, but not totaled. And so they repaired it. But he was like, "Well, what about the diminished value of that? Because yeah, you can fix it, but the people that want to buy a BMW SUV don't want to buy one that was in a crash before, even if it's been fixed, right?" Um, so I believe I'm not 100% sure, but I think in most states like in Wisconsin, Minnesota, or Iowa, I believe you would be entitled to claim diminished value if you could show that even after the repairs, the vehicle is worth less than it would have been with the repairs. But I'm not actually not absolutely certain about that. It's probably more on specialty vehicles, like I mentioned, the SUV. Um, Most cars, it probably isn't going to matter too much, but I don't know. Yeah, I mean, that's part of the problem, and I think you know I have I have asserted in certain cases where someone's car gets wrecked, and because of it they miss work because they got to go shop for a vehicle, or you know because be, I'm trying to think. I had a situation where someone, I think their truck that they would haul cattle with or whatever was down, and you're like, well, I lost I lost revenue because I didn't have I couldn't haul loads and stuff like that. I believe that that kind of stuff would be recoverable. Probably in most states, I think it would be. I think you could claim that in Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Iowa, but I'm not sure about other states. I'm trying to think if there's other examples. Um, but yeah, I mean, damages that naturally flow from someone else's negligence, is recoverable. So missed school, daycare, anything you would normally pay for and can't cancel necessarily. Yeah, I think anything that reasonably flows from that. The here the difficulty the difficulty is this. Not whether someone is entitled to that, but it's really, okay, I need to get back on the road, right? Um, but which usually can get resolved right away. The insurance companies are used to haggling about repairs and totals and things like that. And there's very specific insurance coverage. And in a lot of states, there's actually rules. I believe in Minnesota, for example, insurance companies are subject to this mandatory arbitration between them when someone's car gets damaged. That those rules don't necessarily extend to this kind of stuff, and those kind of have to play out later on through the normal process, which can take time, right? The problem isn't that someone is entitled to more money; you just can't get it right away. It's usually later on, and the person's like, well, I need to get my car fixed right now, or I need to buy another car right now, which is, I think, what tends to happen because people involved in an accident, and let's say it's not a major injury, but they got whiplash type stuff, and the insurance company says, here's $5,000 and I'll replace your vehicle, and they're like, oh, I could really use that money to buy a car, and so they settle and they sign a release, and then they go on to have long-term problems because in the moment, getting another vehicle so they can go to school, go to work, drop their kids off at school, take their kids to daycare, all that kind of stuff is so pressing that you do those kinds of things, right? And I get it, and I think insurance companies and adjusters sort of take advantage of people in those situations because they're like, well, what am I supposed to do otherwise? And I totally get it. Um, Unfortunately, there isn't always, or there isn't often much I can do about that other than to try and help people with these kinds of problems, and help make the best of a bad situation, and then try to get fair compensation later on through the normal process of getting medical records, waiting till you're done treating, making a demand, filing a lawsuit if we have to. That doesn't happen overnight, and you usually don't want it to happen overnight because, you know, you only get one chance at this. You only get one chance to make your demand, and if you're going to have long-term or permanent lifelong injuries from it, you typically can't just resolve that quickly with the insurance company unless they have small limits, right? And that's not a great situation either because you're almost by definition being undercompensated. So, um, yeah, I mean, insurance companies they're kind of a necessary evil, and not all insurance companies are the same. I sort of tell people you kind of get what you pay for. Um, there are the insurance companies that have low rates, but they have those low rates for a reason, and they're kind of they can be kind of ruthless and difficult to deal with. If I have a pretty good insurance company, but I pay a lot of money for insurance, right? So you kind of get what you pay for. Um, so yeah, I mean, I wish there was more that I could immediate time period where they, um, you know, want to get back to work, want to get to the doctor. Maybe you're down to one vehicle now instead of two, and it's a real hassle for families. And I get it. It's not simple going out and just finding another vehicle. I mean, recently the market has been like either you couldn't find vehicles or they're very expensive. Interest rates are high. Um, so it's a tough situation, and I wish I could do more for people, but that's kind of what I let people know. Yeah, I mean, I've unfortunately, I preach a lot about getting adequate insurance on this channel because I've seen it happen too many times where people, for understandable budgetary reasons, sort of um, try to save money. Maybe you waive UIM, so uninsured, underinsured coverage, or you lower the limits, or you give up, collision coverage on your car. I get it. It's no fun paying car insurance bills on something you hope you never have to use, but sometimes it happens. You need it, and you're like, "Wow, I now my life is very much changed because I don't have enough insurance, or the other driver doesn't have enough insurance." It's a tough thing, but because I'm just exposed to it all the time, I've just become very, very careful about not. Um, I've been very aggressive about having plenty of insurance for my family. I have a large family, and I want to make sure that if something terrible should happen, at least we don't have to worry about that so much. Um, yeah, I mean, I think most of us use insurance at some point. You'd like not to, and given how much it costs to fix vehicles now, I mean, I think for a lot of people, it'd be hard to say that it's cheaper in the long run to not have enough insurance and put money away because the reality is most of us don't, right? We don't just say, "Hey, I saved $200." Well, let's say I'm saving $50 a month on my car insurance. I'm going to put $50 of that into a bank account and let that accrue. It'd be great if you did that, but most of us don't do that, right? That's not what tends to happen. And so you kind of get what you pay for. Not all insurance companies are the same. It's kind of one of those things you need to have. And more importantly, it's something you need to have because you can only control yourself. You can't control what happens to other drivers. And if some other Yahoo out there, like this person I was talking to today, I believe they were hit by a drunk driver, right? You can be the best, most careful person in the world, but if someone else someone else isn't as careful, can be in a really tough spot. Um, so yeah, try to keep collision coverage on your policy if you can. Definitely consider gap coverage if you have a loan on it, especially if, I mean, f- figure out what you owe on your car and look at what the fair market value of that vehicle is, like a Kelly Blue Book, things like that. You might even be able to talk to your bank about what the fair market value is, and just realize that if the fair market value of your vehicle is less than you still owe on it, you are at risk of an upside down loan if you get into a wreck and the vehicle is totaled, because they're not paying you for the amount that you owe on the vehicle. They're paying you for the fair market value, if the car is totaled, or the cost to repair it if it can be repaired and it's not more than the fair market value. Yeah, so that's kind of what I have today. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this stream up. I know there's still some comments in the chat. Feel free to continue those comments afterwards. If people have questions about this, um, talk to your insurance agent. Your insurance agent is generally going to be a much better resource than an attorney when it comes to property coverage and what kind of coverage you need and whatever. But if you are involved in a crash, or someone even if it's not obvious they're injured right away, sometimes these things can flare up later on. It's really, really important that you have a chance to talk to an attorney, because it's not going to cost you anything, and see, hey, should we keep the vehicle? Should we take some pictures? Things like that. I'm always happy when I get a chance to at least inspect the vehicle, photograph it, whatever, after someone's injured. So maybe keep that in mind. So, okay. All right. I appreciate everyone for listening, and anyone that watches this later on. I will probably be back live streaming again tomorrow. I don't know what I'll do next week with Christmas, but I'll probably live stream at least a few of those days. So just check it out. Leave a question if you have it. Otherwise, show up in the stream. I'll be happy to chat with everyone. So thanks for watching, and until next time, everyone, have a good one.